For Chapter 9, we're going to discuss the nervous system, and we're going to find out that the combining form neuro means nerve. And when we think of a nerve, we might think of a nerve of the central nervous system, which includes the brain and the spinal cord, but a nerve could also be part of the peripheral nervous system. Those are all the nerves that are outside of the central nervous system. In other words, all the nerves except the nerves of the brain and spinal cord. But neuro is going to be a combining form that you will see throughout this chapter and throughout any data that gets abstracted from a patient's chart in the coding field. You will see neurologist, the study of nerves. You will see neurosurgeon, a surgeon who is going to perform a procedure on the nervous system. So this is a very common combining form in this field. You will also see the combining form psycho. And obviously everybody's going to giggle just a little bit when they hear that, but literally psycho means mind or soul. So psychology would be the study of the mind. In our talk about the nervous system, we're going to discuss the central nervous system, which again is made of the brain and spinal cord, and the peripheral nervous system. The peripheral nervous system is going to be divided into the sensory and the motor divisions. Sensory is going to pick up information. Motor is going to put something in motion. And so we're going to have visceral sensory and somatic sensory. Visceral sensory nerves are going to be nerves that are associated with our internal organs. The combining form viscero means organ. So adding AL to that, visceral means pertaining to organs. So again, the organs within our body would be visceral organs. And they have nerves associated with them that pick up information about what's going on with our internal environment. We have somatic or sensory nerves of the body. Soma means body. Somato means body. So pertaining to the body, we have somatic sensory nerves. These somatic sensory nerves are going to pick up information about our external environment. For example, if I walk outside in the middle of February with nothing but workout shorts and a tank top on and think I'm going to be able to run outside, very quickly somatic sensory nerves are going to pick up information about the temperature, and I'm going to make a pretty quick decision to go back inside and put a few more layers on. So visceral sensory, part of the sensory nervous system, of the peripheral nervous system. It's what our internal organs tell us about what's going on inside of our body. Somatic sensory nerves are going to tell us what's going on with the environment outside of the body. Now, we have the motor division of the peripheral nervous system. The sensory nervous system was picking up information about the internal environment and the external environment. Now we have visceral motor and somatic motor. Okay, those are going to be divisions in which some action occurs. Visceral motor neurons might tell a gland to secrete. Okay, for example, if a hormone is released by the pituitary gland into the bloodstream and it is to stimulate another gland, like thyroid stimulating hormone being released to tell the thyroid gland to to secrete some hormone, then that would be an example of the visceral sensory nerve picking up the hormone that was secreted into the bloodstream and the visceral motor nerve, ultimately creating the secretion of the gland itself. Now, the somatic motor nerves are going to create muscular contraction. Soma, again, means body, and so when we see the somatic nerves of the somatic motor system, we're going to see contraction then occur. Skeletal muscle contraction. Now, we have one further division of the visceral motor system. It's divided into the sympathetic and parasympathetic divisions. Sympathetic means we have something which causes an excitability of our system. If, for example, we are outside late at night getting ready to get into our car and somebody comes out of the shadows and says they want our money and they want our car keys, we only have a few milliseconds to determine if we want to stand there and try to fight the person or if we want to turn and run. That's our sympathetic nervous system releasing epinephrine from the adrenal glands and getting us the glucose into our bloodstream, the increased muscle contraction, for giving us the ability to have the heart contract more times per minute more forcefully. That ultimately gives us what's known as the fight or flight response, and it's a protective mechanism to help us deal with extreme situations as stressors. On the other hand, the parasympathetic nervous system is the system that we want to be dominating most of our time. If the sympathetic nervous system is known as the fight or flight mechanism, the parasympathetic nervous system is known as the dine and recline. It's when all of our digestion processes are occurring at a normal, rather slow pace to make sure that digestion is complete, the nutrients are absorbed, all of the waste materials are slowly moved through the large intestine, and then normal excretory processes occur. Okay. So the dine and recline is not about being keyed up under dramatic amounts of stress that could be life-threatening, but instead how we typically want to handle the day-to-day activities that we do. Keeping our heart rate low, keeping our blood pressure low, digestive processes occurring at a slow pace, respiratory rate under normal control of about 12 to 20 breaths per minute. All of the normal functions that we take for granted that are going on internally under normal circumstances. So those are our divisions of the nervous system. The central nervous system consisting of the brain and spinal cord. The peripheral nervous system, that contains multiple divisions. The first division is the sensory division and the motor division. Sensory means picking up information. Motor means motion. Some action occurs when the motor nervous system is stimulated. The visceral sensory system picks up what's going on with our internal organs. The somatic sensory system picks up what our outside environment is exposing our body to. So, visceral sensory, internal. Somatic sensory, external environment. Then under the motor division, we have the visceral motor and the somatic motor. The visceral motor is getting structures like our glands to secrete. The somatic motor means skeletal muscles contract. Our final division under the visceral motor system is the parasympathetic and sympathetic divisions. Under normal resting conditions, when all is well, the parasympathetic division dominates. When we're keyed up under life-threatening situations, the sympathetic division would come into play to protect us. The parasympathetic division we can think of as dine and recline. The sympathetic nervous system the fight or flight mechanism. Now, when we talk about nerves and we talk about the divisions, the central nervous system being the brain and spinal cord, the peripheral nervous system being the sensory and the motor, divided into the visceral sensory, the somatic sensory, the visceral motor, the somatic motor, and the visceral motor being divided into the sympathetic and the parasympathetic, they all revolve around nerves. This is our basic nerve. We have the cell body where the organelles, the mitochondria, the nucleus, all the organelles that are necessary for the cell to reproduce itself are located. We have these structures called dendrites. Dendrites are going to be like antennae. They're going to pick up information from our outside environment if they are a somatic sensory neuron, from our internal environment if they're a visceral sensory neuron. These dendrites, again, act as antennae, picking up information that gets relayed to the cell body and then down the axon. The axon leads away from the cell body and finally to the synaptic terminals. These synaptic terminals are going to terminate on either another nerve, a muscle, or a gland, and something will occur. If it would, for example, terminate on a muscle, then muscular contraction would occur. Now, the central nervous system, the brain and spinal cord, are made up of millions upon millions of these axons, or excuse me, of these neurons. The peripheral nervous system, the same. Millions upon millions of these nerves form the peripheral nerves as well. When we get to the level of the brain is our supercomputer. The spinal cord on its own can carry out some functions that we call spinal nerves, or excuse me, spinal reflexes, and these spinal reflexes are usually there to protect us. It even speeds up the process more quickly, so the brain doesn't even have to become involved. But for the most part, our higher powers of thinking and activity are all going to be regulated by the brain. The brain is our supercomputer. Okay, it is so intelligent, so vast, that we have just barely scratched its potential in human existence. It consists of the frontal lobe, the parietal lobe, the occipital lobe, the temporal lobe, and the structure at the bottom, which would be the little brain or the cerebellum. The lobes of the brain correspond with the skeletal structures of the cranium. The frontal bone covers the frontal lobe. The parietal bone covers the parietal lobe. The occipital bone covers the occipital lobe. The temporal bone covers the temporal lobe. And so those structures are the most superficial structures of the brain, and together we refer to all of these structures, these lobes, the frontal, parietal, occipital, and temporal, as the cerebrum or cerebral cortex. Our higher level functioning, our personality, our problem solving skills, our emotions, our ability to think on our own, those are all cerebrum induced abilities of the brain. The cerebellum, the little brain, helps with motor function, but it's not the higher level functioning that the frontal, parietal, occipital, and temporal lobes of the cerebral cortex give us. But nevertheless, this is an overview of the nervous system and terms associated with the nervous system, its various divisions, its functional unit, the neuron, and the divisions of the brain and the cerebrum.